Hilda has without a doubt become one of my favorite series on Netflix. Not just because of its interesting characters, beautiful animation, and creative world building, though all these things are undoubtedly amazing, but because, as a self-proclaimed mythology nerd, I can't help but appreciate the way the writers are able to weave elements of Celtic history and folklore into their stories. And Season 3 proved to be no exception, as, despite its shortened runtime, it has some really interesting references to Celtic folklore, which I believe are worth talking about. Also, if it wasn't already obvious, there will be spoilers ahead for Season 3, so you should really make sure you're caught up before watching this video. We're starting things off with everyone's favorite little yellow weirdo, and Astrid's neighbor, the Puka, an unsuccessful shapeshifter who constantly demands to borrow random items and appliances. While the word Puka is believed to be English in origin, depictions of the Puka in folklore are often inconsistent, appearing in various stories as a dog, horse, or goat, giving credence to the idea that the Puka is actually a shapeshifter. The Puka's personality also seems to vary considerably, often straddling the line between helpful and annoying. While they have been known to help those they consider friends, they also have a reputation for playing pranks, which can sometimes stray into illegal territory, like leading travelers astray or stealing people's possessions. Even if you do manage to befriend a Puka, the bond can very easily be broken by giving them a gift, especially a suit of clothes, which means that Astrid could have a potential solution to her Puka problem, though I'd wager that she enjoys his company far more than she lets on. In episode 3, Hilda travels through a magic tree to a world where mountain giants still walk the earth. While the pan-dimensional Fairtalk tree is clearly a reference to Yggdrasil, the mythical world tree that connects the 9 realms of Norse mythology, there are some noticeable differences between the two. The most prominent being that, if we stop to count these symbols decorating the inside of the tree, we can determine that Hilda's world is just one of over 19 different dimensions, some of which we've already seen, like the world of the fairies, which could indicate that Hilda and her mother might one day have a back door into fairy country, though I'm getting ahead of myself. Though by far my favorite part of the episode, if not my favorite part of the entire season, is Hilda's visit to the land of the mountain giants, which essentially serves as a creative retelling of the mythical origins of England. Kinda. According to legend, England, then known as Albion, was originally inhabited by a clan of giants, until Brutus, the mythical first king of England, decided to take the island for himself and his followers, driving off the giants and brutally disposing of any who opposed him. But while the show's story plays out essentially the same way, with a group of humans driving off a clan of giants, rather than a one-sided story of good versus evil, the conflict in Hilda boils down to 2 different groups failing to get along, though the original story simply assumes that we'll be on the side of Brutus and the invaders, despite making it very clear that they are the aggressors. In the episode, both sides have understandable grievances with one another. The Giant Slayer is not some infallible legendary king, but a hurt young girl who lost everything she had because of the giants. While rather than the stupid, angry brutes of English folklore, the giants are kind but enormous creatures that have a difficult time living and communicating with beings so much smaller than themselves. Though the episode ends with the 2 sides still unable to reconcile, Woodman assures Hilda that just because she failed to stop history from repeating itself doesn't mean that her attempts at change were meaningless, because change takes time and we aren't always around to see it happen. Did I mention that this episode also has my favorite Woodman cameo? While on a boating trip with the Sparrow Scouts, Hilda and her friends rescue a misplaced merman who seems hell-bent on making them laugh. Though nowhere near as popular as their female counterparts, mermen are surprisingly prevalent in Celtic folklore. Though it seems that this underwater irritation may have been based, at least in part, on the Blue Men of Minch, a tribe of Scottish mermen and women said to occupy the Minch Atlantic Sea Channel, a stretch of sea located between the Outer Hebrides and Scotland. In addition to his bluish skin tone, several elements of Eugene's backstory loosely correlates with the mythology of the Blue Men. Eugene worked for the King of the Sea. The Blue Men are ruled over by a chief. Eugene was accidentally exiled from the ocean. The Blue Men were believed to be angels banished from heaven. The Blue Men also apparently had quite the appreciation for the arts, as according to legend, when a large ship passed into their waters, their chief would shout out a poetic challenge to the vessel's captain, who would only be allowed to leave if he answered back with a poem of his own. But if he failed, the Blue Men would summon up a storm and sink his ship. I guess we can also add disrespect for human life to our list of similarities. The trio's first encounter with the Fae occurs in Tofferton, when they accidentally pass into the fairy world through a fairy mound. While it is a common belief in Celtic folklore that fairy mounds and other elements of the natural environment, like caves and bodies of water, could function as portals to the world of the Fae, the actual location of the fairy realm tends to vary between sources, with some of the more common locations being underground, in another dimension, or on a magical island. Thus, the writers of Hilda decided to combine these concepts by creating a fairy island that's both underground and in another dimension. While the exact mechanics of how this works are never specified, considering that things relating to the Fae are very seldomly straightforward, this honestly makes a lot of sense. While the fairy-eating monster, which I've decided to call a spog, doesn't seem to parallel any known creature from Celtic folklore, hybrid animal creatures have been documented in more recent fairy encounters. Though meetings with the fair folk may rightly seem like an element of the past, according to the fairy census, a survey aimed at collecting data about fairy encounters, hybrid fairy creatures like the spog do actually exist. Though it's also completely possible that this creature is simply a figment of the writer's imagination, and I'm just reading way too much into it, though that is basically my job. But while the spog may be a figment of the writer's imagination, fairy tunes, songs which are believed to have been passed down to us by the Fae, do actually exist. Though, unlike in the show, these songs are not believed to possess any special powers. At least not as far as I know. Though I still wouldn't play them anywhere near a fairy mound, just in case. While depictions of the fairy realm are few and far between, being that in most stories, going there is kind of a one-way trip, those that do manage to return often don't fare very well. A common theme within fairy folklore is that time in the Fae realm passes infinitely slower than it does on Earth, causing those that return to either age into dust or die from exhaustion as time begins to catch up with them. On the other hand, those that actually survive the return trip often become so accustomed to the carefree life they had in the Fae realm that they're unable to readjust to human society, often becoming obsessed with finding a way back across the Veil. Which is probably why Hilda's grandparents decided that leaving wasn't the best idea. This isn't to say that relations with the Fae are always a bad thing, as, just like in the show, there's actually a long tradition of fairies healing humans. In fact, there are many fairy sites throughout Britain that are associated with curing a particular illness, like the Hobholes of North Yorkshire coast, which are said to be home to hobgoblins who can treat whooping cough. Though, to be fair, their medical prowess often goes hand in hand with their ability to spread disease, as in the past, fairies were frequently cited as the cause of rapid and debilitating illness. In fact, the famed Irish poet W.B. Yeats was so fascinated by the supposed fairy sickness that he actually conducted a study to determine its symptoms, which included cold pale skin, fatigue, fainting fits, and wasting, all of which sounds surprisingly similar to the disease that Joanna was suffering from. Yeah, on second thought, maybe trusting fairies with your healthcare isn't such a good idea. Reviewing Hilda has been one of the best experiences I've ever had on this channel. But that being said, I'm also glad that the series was able to have such an incredible ending. If you're looking for something to fill the void left by this amazing show, then I would highly suggest checking out the films of Cartoon Saloon, an Irish-based animation company that has made some beautiful films based around Irish history and folklore. I even made some videos about them, so you know they have to be good. As always, I'm Silver Jade, asking you to please remember to support your local library, and I will see you all next time.